King and Aram built eras. Haman, De La Hoya, Hearn, each carved their own territories. Then, a new player arrived. Not a promoter, a nation. Site fees exploded. Rivals sharing cards. Fights once labeled impossible were suddenly real. And at the center of it all, one man. To understand why Saudi Arabia is taking over boxing, you must start with their history and the man at the center of it all. Turki bin Abdul Mohsin Al-Sheikh. Born in Riyadh 1981, Turki descends from two old Najdi families, the Al-Sheikh line on his father's side and the Al-Musharraf line on his mother's, both tracing back to the powerful Banu Tamim tribe. Yet despite that heritage, Turki has said in interviews he grew up in his grandparents' home and considered his upbringing middle class by Gulf standards. After graduating from King Fahd Security College in 2001, he rotated through the Saudi state's core institutions, the Ministry of Interior and the Ministry of Defense. Think Homeland Security and the Pentagon in US terms. These weren't just jobs, they were gateways into royal power. And in 2009, that access deepened when he married into the family of Dr. Nasser bin Abdulaziz Al Dawood, a man who would later serve as Saudi Arabia's Deputy Minister of Interior. That marriage placed Turki directly inside one of the kingdom's two great security establishments. And above those ministries, the royal court, the closest Saudi equivalent to the White House, where all decisions are made, all budgets approved, and all appointments flow. To work there is to stand one step below the throne. In 2015, King Salman took the throne. His son, Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, became Deputy Crown Prince and Minister of Defense. Just 29, and already one of the most powerful men in the kingdom. And that same year, Turki Al-Sheikh was pulled into the royal court as an advisor, right into MBS's orbit, at the very moment the young prince began consolidating power. But how did a prince like Mohammed bin Salman rise so fast in a monarchy filled with hundreds of royal contenders? Traditionally, Saudi succession passed sideways, from brother to brother, not down to sons. The heir apparent was Mohammed bin Nayef, the king's nephew. He was globally respected, led the kingdom's fight against Al-Qaeda. Washington trusted him. Steady, reliable, powerful. But to MBS, Nayef wasn't an ally. He was a rival. In June 2017, Nayef was summoned to the palace. Officially, the call came from King Salman, but behind the scenes, it was engineered by his son. The king wanted the throne to stay in the bloodline, and MBS wanted power, now. But Nayef was too strong to ignore. He controlled the Interior Ministry. He had CIA ties. He commanded a loyal network of princes. So, he was forced out. Within hours, Mohammed bin Salman was declared crown prince. That November, he launched what was called an anti-corruption purge. More than 200 princes, ministers, and tycoons rounded up, detained in Riyadh's Ritz-Carlton. Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, Prince Mutayyib bin Abdullah, Bakr bin Laden. Not small players. Rival power centers, wealthy, connected, and in some cases, heirs themselves. They were held until they signed over billions, officially to the state. In reality, funneled into the Public Investment Fund. Because the old Saudi bargain is getting very expensive. For decades, the deal was simple. No personal income tax for citizens, state-subsidized power and water, and a public sector employing nearly 2/3 of Saudi nationals. That lifestyle, funded by oil, and oil is volatile. When prices dip or output gets cut, deficits start showing up. Riyadh's fiscal break-even sits somewhere in the 80s to 90s per barrel, yet market prices and forecasts remain well below that. That gap is the risk. So now, MBS is moving fast. He's raising domestic energy and water tariffs, with cash transfers to cushion households. He's nudging more nationals into the private sector. And he's building non-oil engines, tourism, entertainment, tech. In that playbook, sports, they're not the destination, they're the on-ramp. A fast way to pull in visitors, spin up service jobs, and rewrite the country's story before the window closes. That's why the marquee events start showing up. Not as a splurge, but as step one of diversification. Saudi Arabia entered the 21st century with immense oil wealth, but also with a shadow.
There's a major incident in Lower Manhattan.
We just got a report in that there's been some sort of explosion at the World Trade Center in New York City.
Apparently, a plane has just crashed into the World Trade Center.
We understand that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center.
In 2001, 15 of the 19 hijackers on 9/11 were Saudi nationals. The kingdom denied state involvement, but the damage was done.
Was the Saudi government involved in any way in the 9/11 attacks, directly or indirectly? One section of the report states, quote, while in the United States, some of the September 11 hijackers were in contact with and received support or assistance from individuals who may be connected to the Saudi government.
In the West, Saudi Arabia became shorthand for extremism. At home, public executions, the driving ban on women. The Arab Spring crushed in Bahrain. Then came the war in Yemen, described by the UN as one of the worst humanitarian crises on Earth. And then, 2018. Jamal Khashoggi murdered in Istanbul. A US report concluded the operation was approved by MBS. Saudi wealth remained vast, but its reputation was in tatters. Oil alone could not buy legitimacy. Enter Vision 2030. Yes, it was about economic diversification, but just as importantly, it was about rebranding the kingdom. A shift from oil dependence to tourism, culture, and sport. Because sports captivate the world. Sports bypass politics. Sports can wash away bloodstains. This playbook isn't new. Hitler's Germany, Argentina's junta, Putin's Russia, Qatar's World Cup. It's sports washing. But unlike others, Saudi Arabia had an unrivaled war chest. Football was first. Ronaldo, Neymar, Benzema. Then golf, LIV forcing a PGA merger. Formula One, the Dakar Rally, WWE.esports. And now, boxing. By 2025, Saudi Arabia wasn't just hosting fights. It was building a blueprint to control the sport. The idea was simple: replicate the UFC model. A single league, one calendar, one power center. To do that, Turki Al-Sheikh turned to a man who had already pulled it off: Dana White. White transformed the UFC from a fringe promotion into a monopoly of mixed martial arts. Every top fighter signed under one umbrella. Rankings, matchmaking, and paychecks controlled by one company. That model is exactly what Turkey wants for boxing. And Dana White doesn't come alone. Behind him stands TKO Group Holdings, the parent company formed from the merger of UFC and WWE. WWE already has deep ties to Saudi Arabia, with a billion-dollar deal to stage multiple pay-per-views each year in Riyadh. WWE President Nick Khan, one of the most powerful deal-makers in sports entertainment, has also been part of the conversations. The message is clear. This isn't about a few big fights. This is about building a new empire. TKO-style boxing, backed by Saudi billions, run with UFC discipline and WWE spectacle. But what about boxing's existing power brokers? Promoters like Top Rank, Matchroom, PBC, and Golden Boy built their empires over decades. They control networks, fighters, titles. Saudi Arabia doesn't need to buy them. It can make them irrelevant. How? By going directly to the fighters. For now, Saudi Arabia is overpaying. Fighters who would make $10 million in Las Vegas are earning 30 or 40 in Riyadh. These massive purses buy loyalty and spectacle while destabilizing the promoter system. But why overpay today, only to plan lower pay tomorrow? Because once enough fighters are tied to Riyadh contracts, once the league is established, the leverage shifts. No more bidding wars, no rival promoters, just one buyer. And one buyer sets the price. Promoters won't be bought out, they'll be sidelined. Fighters who once had freedom may find themselves locked into a single system, just as UFC fighters today earn a fraction of what boxers make. This is the long game. In 2000, the Muhammad Ali Boxing Reform Act was passed in the United States. It was designed to protect fighters from exploitation, to stop managers from acting as promoters, to ensure transparency in contracts, and above all, to prevent any one company from monopolizing the sport. But the Ali Act only applies in America. And if the biggest fights are staged in Riyadh, its protections fade. That is the danger. By overpaying fighters today, Saudi Arabia destabilizes the promoter system. Once enough stars are tied to Riyadh contracts, the old bidding wars that gave fighters leverage collapse. With one buyer, one league, setting the price, the Ali Act becomes irrelevant. The very law created to protect boxing could be undone, and the silencing has already begun. At the Canelo versus Crawford fight, one of boxing's largest outlets, Boxing Scene, was denied credentials.
Asking specifically how surprised I am by Lance Pugmire getting his credential denied for this week, I would say not surprised at all. It follows a pattern of everything that's been going on with Boxing Scene with regard to Riyadh season and the ring promoted events over the past year or so. How surprised am I that this situation exists? If you had asked me a couple years ago, would I see a day where a media outlet would be entirely banned from covering a major promoter's events? Yeah, that's surprising. That's a deeply unfortunate twist for the entire boxing media, not just for Boxing Scene, but for what it means for everyone else. As I talk about in the article, the culture of fear being cultivated when you start acting this way with regard to one media outlet and the way that it spreads to other media outlets. That's a big problem.
Writers at the Ring magazine, long the Bible of boxing, whispered that criticism of Turki al-Sheikh meant losing access. Independence, they said, was no longer an option. This is not just about fighters' paychecks. It is about silencing the watchdogs. Without independent promoters and without a free press, boxing becomes a closed system, controlled by Riyadh, insulated from criticism, and immune to reform. The Ali Act once protected the sport from monopolies, but today, under Turki al-Sheikh, the monopoly is being built in plain sight. The track record offers a warning. The Saudi Pro League signed Ronaldo, Neymar, and Benzema, but stadiums often sit half empty. Live Golf lured away stars, but fractured the sport, left lawsuits in its wake, and triggered congressional investigations. Even in esports, Entire organizations refused Saudi sponsorships over human rights concerns. And in boxing, we're already seeing the same. Critics warn the sport's voice is being bought before our eyes. The pattern is clear. Saudi billions can buy stars, but not always stability. For boxing, the risks are enormous.
You must learn.